Welcome to It's Your Business, a program designed to highlight our local small businesses. I'm your host, Veronica Douglas. Emergencies can happen anywhere, anytime. They can be caused by severe weather or intentional acts. The very nature of an emergency is unpredictable and can change in scope and impact. In this segment, we will talk with Angelique Bartholomew, Vice President of MPACT Strategic Consulting, a national consulting and advisory services firm that specializes in emergency management and disaster recovery. Welcome, Angelique.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's start off by talking about when MPACT started. You guys started in 2007, and at that time, what was the vision of your company?
For the most part, our CEO and President, Spurgeon Robinson, had been working as a project manager and engineer-based opportunities, and came across opportunities to really cover disasters with a niche market, and developed a niche market for covering disasters on a federal and state and local level, and expanded the company's vision from there with specialists in each area, from program management to project management, FEMA regulations, housing, construction. And our vision sort of evolved out of disaster, because out of disaster comes a lot of opportunity. And our vision emerged from there.
So you guys have a really extensive list of the services you offer. Let's rewind a little bit and give us the definition of a disaster. Exactly how is a disaster defined?
For the most part, of course, there are declarations for disaster. So, but disasters can occur in various ways. I mean, anytime people are impacted by circumstances that they cannot control, it's going to be considered a disaster. However, there is a federal declaration that really goes out when a certain number of people are covered, or if there is a specific area or target range of land or properties destroyed, it's going to be a declaration. And that is how a disaster may be defined, currently under our government regulations and guidelines.
So that's a disaster is essentially something that's natural or man-made, and we can consider a disaster on like a cyber security disaster, or equipment failure can also be considered a disaster.
Absolutely,
is that correct?
Absolutely. Some of our airports recently experienced, issues with power outages and things like that. When generators go down, that causes a mass impact. So where people are affected on a great level, or transportation is affected, or they have an inability to be mobilized, it's going to be considered a disaster. And of course, the natural disasters that we have been a significant part of across the country, from hurricanes to floods, those are disasters.
And how do you help your clients prepare for these disasters?
There are a number of different ways to prepare for disaster, and having been involved in just about every major storm across the country, there are best practices that emerge out of every situation, from Katrina to our current Harvey situation, and even Puerto Rico. There are tools and best practices that evolve out of those, from mobilizing people to preparing in advance with generators and various other things, right down to being pre-positioned and having a team that can immediately go into action when these things occur is going to be critical. And those are things that have come out of preparation and experience from our team being engaged with disaster recovery across the board. A great example is how Louisiana had a short-term recovery program, housing program, one of the first instances where people's homes were repaired in short-term, getting them back into their homes with running water and things like that, which are going to be critical in disaster. Out of that has come construction contracts that will allow cities and states and municipalities to mobilize much quicker and get those houses into a habitable state, and then move into long-term recovery. So best practices come out of each storm, making sure that there's an exit strategy as we're all familiar with the situation that occurred here years ago with Rita, people not being able to get out of the city lines, boundaries and everything, moving into Dallas and various other areas. So right down to exit strategies and things like that. So helping municipalities, helping governments, and even communities, right down to small communities, find ways to recover quicker, faster, and mobilize around these storms is what we do to help them prepare and be prepared the next time around.
And there are essentially 4 stages to emergency management. Walk us through each stage.
For the most part, you're really looking at pre-positioning, of course, being your first stage. If you've got a pre-positioned team on board to handle or to mobilize, to handle the issues that will occur from, just really what to do immediately after an occurrence, right down to, areas where people can gather water, which they call points of distribution or pods. That is critical. I was contacted recently by a private client that said, hey, we really didn't even know where to tell our employees to go to get water or how to get those things done. So immediately following a disaster, you want to be able to really have people quickly pull things back together where they're at least safe. So safety, of course, is going to be the first priority in those stages of recovery, and then determining what damages are really done and the assessment of those damages, which people kind of do independently. And in Texas, we can definitely give Houstonians kudos for, pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and being able to get back into their homes and figure out what was needing to be done, a lot of them taking a lot of it into their own hands. But of course, the short-term recovery where FEMA comes in and really evaluates and determines, what's needed to happen with the blue tarps and things like that, if it's a flood situation or a hurricane situation like we've experienced. And then, of course, you move into long-term recovery, and that is going to be the evaluation of insurance, and then the recovery where people are actually getting their homes restored or repaired with both FEMA recovery dollars and then the what they call CDBG-DR dollars, which will be coming down from the state and federal, the federal and state governments to the municipalities to get them into recovery. And then, of course, prior to that is the assessment of all those things. So you go through various stages of recovery, and it is a healing process, and I don't think people really, pay attention to the healing aspect of what people have to go through when it comes to recovery work. But it's a big part of, how the community reconvenes, and Houstonians have been great at that, as well as Louisiana. Folks that we've really experienced a lot of that with, and Puerto Rico as well.
So when we talk about storms such as Rita and Ike and Katrina, within the first 90 days, what is absolutely essential that must take place of the storms hitting?
I mean, it's going to be, the emergency management for safety and ensuring that people are safe and they're in habitable areas. And if they need to be relocated from their homes, determining where they're going to go. You see a lot of shelters. So, of course, you prepare shelters and communities. Another thing that we've done to help communities and municipalities prepare is to have those designated areas for people to be housed and to get food and shelter and those types of things, and to make sure that they're safe. And in that next 60 days, you're really trying to determine where those folks are able to go for shelter and clear out, of course, those public shelters and move them back into habitable areas as quickly as possible, and get the assessments done for the most damaged areas and where they need to, immediately provide mobilization for people.
So talk to us a little bit about pre-position contracts. I'm sure they play a huge role in the services that you provide. What are some essential pre-position contracts that should be in place, and what are some agencies here that you've worked with to help get those contracts in place? There
are a number of different aspects to pre-positioning contracts, and it really depends on the need of the agency. We have looked at everything from, participating on debris removal, pre-positioning contracts, to inspection contracts, to assessments, and those types of things. It really just depends on the agency's need and how that pre-positioning contract really needs to go into effect. The main thing is to ensure that there is a COOP, which they call a continuity of operations plan. And if a continuity of operations plan is in place and the agency or organization is familiar with the steps that they need to take to move into emergency management and recovery efforts, then you come and execute that plan. But we're on board with a number of different agencies, from Houston Area Galveston Council to the GLO, the General Land Office, to colleges and universities, to help them prepare and have teams to come in and immediately execute recovery work. Everything from pods, which of course is the point of distribution centers, to mobilizing and ensuring that generators and things like that are in place, to the management of case management and handling housing and returning to housing and what people need to do in terms of reporting to FEMA and those types of things. So pre-positioning contracts are really a smart way to activate teams in emergencies, but it's also going to be a requirement and a best practice going forward, because we really don't see storms going anywhere. We've just got to be better prepared to handle them.
And MPACT helps with the vendor management with those pre-position contracts.
Absolutely.
What is the term length for those contracts typically?
I mean, your FEMA programs really run anywhere from 12 to 18 months. You've really got to have vendors on board that are going to be able to execute in those timelines and really put things together very quickly. So vendor management is critical, making sure small businesses are on board and they have the capacity to actually perform when these contracts are open or executed. Being prepared for small businesses to get the capital that they need, and having them prepared for the capacity to execute on their teams or to ramp up their teams with employees, and having them prepared to go into action is going to be critical. So really making sure that the vendors are certified and that they are in good standing, verification of that standing, and making sure compliance is in place, as well as ensuring that the general contractors are paying on time so that those small businesses can continue to operate is going to be critical. So a firm like ours would oversee the compliance management of those small businesses and ensure that they're up to par on their certifications and that they have what they need to continue to operate and that they're being paid on time. A lot of small businesses are taken advantage of in disaster because a lot of the large firms move in to execute, and they execute contracts with a very minor percentage being given to small businesses, and the small businesses ramp up to try to get in on some of the opportunities that are available out of recovery. So you really want to have small business vendor management and compliance in place to ensure that they're able to continue to work and to feed those general contractors or those large contractors that have come in to execute the recovery work that is being done on these opportunities, because it's millions of dollars of recovery. So those small businesses have a chance to grow economically and build a workforce and do that in those communities. So it's also important to utilize local vendors for the recovery work.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, I want to talk about some of the work that you've done in Texas, Louisiana, Puerto Rico, Miami. You guys have done work all around the country, so we'll cut to a quick break.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue our conversation with Angelique Bartholomew.
I've seen people's lives change just by attending a class at HCC.
Some of them might not have the financial means to go to a four-year university. That doesn't make them any less quote-unquote smart than the kids who go to a four-year school.
HCC is easy to get to. It's easy to apply and easy to become a part of.
It gave me so much confidence
Once you finish your 2 years there, you can transition into a four-year university or go into the workforce.
It's affordable, it's accessible, it changes lives.
Welcome back. We're going to continue our conversation with Angelique. And Angelique, we left off talking about the work that you've done in New York and New Jersey, Miami, Puerto Rico, and of course here in Houston. Talk to us a little bit about how you helped Houston recover from one of the largest rain event that we've ever seen in the city. Tell us how you helped us recover.
For the most part, MPACT has been around for 12 years, so we're a well-known firm for disaster recovery, emergency management, FEMA regulations, and those types of things. We've actually assisted the city with their PWs, which is their preparation of the FEMA public worksheets on a lot of the public municipality project properties and things like that. And of course, we've been heavily involved in the Housing Authority recovery and assisting the Housing Authority with HUD regulations and those types of things. So we oversee a lot of the program and project management along with the FEMA regulations to help the city move forward with recovery of dollars and documentation that they need to actually get the federal government moving to get the dollars down to the city.
And how important is it for agencies like HCC to contract with you to get the reporting correct and on time? What type of things can happen to agencies like HCC if we don't have that reporting in and we don't have receipts and we can't prove what we've done?
It really leaves a lot on the table. We assisted, for example, Houston Independent School District with the preparation of their insurance claims and documentation. It's really critical mass to move in and have the proper photos and documentation for the recovery from FEMA versus insurance. And people really kind of get those two mixed up. But they're two totally separate areas of documentation and two totally separate recovery methods. So making sure that universities and ISDs have in place documentation, everything from volunteers that have helped move in with employees to administration coming in immediately after a storm to clean up and to pick up and all of those types of things. You want folks taking documented photos, and you want times and dates and what the status of things were prior to a storm to really be in place. And that is a big part of the regulation process, and even drilling down on the amount of hours that your teams or employees are voluntarily coming in, because they're recovering as well themselves. So you want to make sure that that is even documented and having those things in place, making sure that HISD had those things properly in place so that they could compare what the insurance claim was versus what the FEMA claim is going to be, was a big part of the overall dollars and cents of recovery. And that makes a huge difference, and it will for HCC as well.
And we saw the city really come together during that storm. Overall, do you feel that Houston was prepared for that rain event?
No one could be prepared, for that level of storm. I mean, there were trillions of gallons of water dumped into Houston in a matter of hours. I'm in disaster recovery and I wasn't prepared. My family was, we were awakened with an evacuation almost 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm thinking, surely it's just gonna flood, and we would be okay. And I'm out in Fort Bend County, which really hadn't experienced the levels or depth of water that Houston had experienced from a flood capacity, but we were evacuated, and I was, immediately found myself, gathering and thinking of my own tools and documentation that I would need to get my children out of the house and to determine if there was an evacuation place to go to. We were fortunately blessed to be able to go to my aunt's, and on a little bit higher ground, but we were threatened with a flooding car the whole way. So I don't think that there is really any municipality ever prepared fully for what we experienced here in Houston. And I know that Mayor Turner and Judge Emmett really went into full operation mode to help the city, prepare as much as possible. But having been in disaster only 3.5 years myself, or 3 years myself, our team was actually texting and calling, making sure that we were okay, and that there was something in place for us to, immediately send out information. We took it upon ourselves to reach out to officials and the OEM to let them know, EOM to let them know, Emergency Management Office to let them know, hey, we're here if you need us, and our team can go into full execution mode, even if it's pro bono at this stage, because that is an emergency that requires you to be a constituent and a business person at the same time to help people really recover and do what they need to do. So no is the answer, long-term answer to your question. You can't really ever be fully prepared for something on that level, but you can have things in place to help you quickly recover. It's almost the difference in being prepared and recovering if you've got something pre-positioned and making it happen.
And you mentioned being awakened at 3 o'clock in the morning. What is the best method to get that information out before, during, and of course after the storm, so that the citizens are aware of what's going on, the storm is coming? What's the best method to do that? Is that text? Is that radio?
Determining what works best for your family in terms of communication is going to be critical, but in terms of agency, it's going to be having that continuity of operations plan in place. And that's what we specialize in, making sure that there's a plan for communications across the board on all levels of departments, department heads, employees, right down to ensuring that everybody's able to check in at a certain point. So a continuity of operations plan for every agency is a best practice. So we want to make sure that agencies and HCC and universities and even Houston has a true continuity of operations plan, not something that's just sitting on the shelf. And of course, there's exercise plans that go into all of that. But those are plans that everyone would be aware of, from an executive and administration level right down to your employees and labor personnel and janitors or blue collar workers. You want to make sure that they know exactly where to report and what to do, and that everybody's accounted for in these types of situations. So the communications plan is going to come from sitting down with every area of an organization or a lead and disseminating that information throughout the team and throughout the agency to make sure that they know what that continuity of operations is. You can see where executives may know about one plan and employees may have another, and you've got people kind of clashing where you are trying to recover, and that can also impact your recovery dollar as well, because there were things done on this level that were not done on this level, and people are not communicating and bringing the same or the required documentation together to recover for a facility or to recover for assets. And it costs you in the long run because there's no real communication and continuity between those communications. So making sure that everyone's on the same page, and if it's social media, if it's text, if it's going to be a reporting time or area, all of those things are going to be required, and making sure people know what to do immediately following a recovery effort is going to be critical. And that's what we help companies do and businesses and agencies do.
And how often should someone look at that plan? Revisit it 6 months, revisit a year?
It doesn't hurt to go through a continuity of operations exercise probably every 6 months. Our ecosystem and our weather is very unpredictable. Nobody can ever really say that there is not global warming and various things happening. I mean, you can really look at statistics and look at numbers, they don't lie, to say that there is something occurring in our atmosphere and in our environment that we need to be aware, alert, and prepared for. We can't operate the same way that we did even 10 to 15 years ago when Katrina happened. Storms have evolved, and Harvey and Irma are proof of that. So being more prepared and having teams ready and having what what best practices really look like is about the best that you can do. And it's your accountability, and the onus is on that agency to do better than they did the storm before. And that's what we look at as a team. Hey, how can this really have been done better? What is it that we missed in this city or state or this recovery that may not be missed here? Where are the gaps? And you improve on that process, but it's still very unpredictable.
In MPACT, you have a portfolio of a $100 million project to $16 billion. Tell us about the work that you've done in Miami.
Well, Miami is still on hold. A lot of the recovery work for our team has still been on hold, but the recovery efforts between Florida and Puerto Rico has really allowed us to expand what we do. Puerto Rico's recovery is the largest FEMA recovery project in history, and we were a part of that project, which of course is related to housing and recovery. But there are so many good things that come out of those efforts. Our team was really able to participate in everything from housing recovery and small business development and growth to gardening and helping to facilitate sponsorships for playgrounds and gardening and, beautification and those types of things. So out of disaster, as I said earlier, comes so many economic opportunities, workforce development, and recovery really gives you a chance to do things more resiliently, do them better, and improve the environment, not just bring people back to a habitable recovery, equal level of habitants. You want to make sure that you're improving upon what's being done and making it more resilient, making it better. And that's what recovery work really does for me. You get to see all of the ugly, and you get to reinvent it and recreate it, and you get to help people restore their lives after a disaster and improve it and make it even better. So that's the benefit of being in disaster recovery.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the exciting project that you're working on, and that is the Texas Bullet Train, which is a train, the first of its kind in the United States. Tell us about the work that you're doing with that organization.
Well, it's a unique opportunity, and we like unique opportunities. Nobody's in disaster recovery without enjoying unique opportunities to perform and to bring something great out of it. And out of disaster recovery has come a special or niche capability for MPACT, strategic consulting for compliance and oversight, as well as workforce development and economic development. And the high-speed rail is one of those economic development opportunities, bringing or bridging together North Dallas with Houston, and bringing those communities together in a high-speed transit capacity. Of course, the first of its kind. We participated in the policy and procedure development for MBEs to participate on that project, and helping the administration of TCRH, which is Texas Central Rail Holdings, to put in place a small business participation plan, as well as a workforce development plan. It's going to create over 10,000 jobs throughout the span of construction to execution, and you want to see people from the community benefit. So that corridor in which the high-speed rail will run, we were responsible for ensuring that Texans were able to be a part of that process and project. And we're looking to TCRH to really honor that commitment to small businesses by engaging them on contracts and helping construction firms really come up to speed and engage with some of the larger, what they call first bullet builders, which are the larger general contractors or owners rather that will participate in this project. Getting that small firm to really participate out of Houston and out of Bryan College Station in North Dallas to be a part of building this train and putting people to work and utilizing universities, community colleges, ISDs to develop the workforce that's going to be required.
This is all so great, Angelique.
Yes.
I appreciate you coming on and sharing all this
We're
information
excited about
with
it.
us today.
Thank you so much.
For more information about Houston Community College Small Business Development Program, please visit our website. For It's Your Business, I'm your host, Veronica Douglas.